The Elder Scrolls Online just announced some big changes coming to the game in 2025 with their first real preview event, ESO Direct, being confirmed now for April 10th, less than 1 month away. Apparently, these updates include massive adventures, new worlds, and challenges to come according to the email preview I was given. But what could this actually mean? Well, we do have some ideas based on the letter sent out by studio director Matt Fire at the end of 2024, which I think give a pretty clear direction into what we're actually going to see next month for the first time at this 2025 reveal. Now, as you know, usually ESO delivers one big expansion per year, called a chapter, which is essentially a large DLC-sized zone, which would include brand new storylines, new cities to explore, a new challenging 12-player trial, as well as some type of new system like scribing, Tales of Tribute, companions, and so on. But from what we know so far, 2025 is not going to do that. In fact, Matt wrote last year that the ESO team was finally going to, quote, turn the page on the chapter system for yearly content releases and do something new instead called seasons. He also said that they would still do lots of story content, but now, looking into 2025, they would concentrate on different types of content to support all types of ESO players. Also, according to him, 2025 was going to be a transition year for new content, but that they were still going to have new zone-based content launch this year. So what does that mean exactly? Well, I think what we will see first at the April preview event will not be a full chapter zone as he explained, but more likely something smaller, more similar to a story zone, which we often saw in Q4 of previous years, like the Firesong DLC with the Zone of Galen, the Deadlands DLC in Fargrave, Markarth, and so on. Basically, these were like smaller zones in terms of the area covered, but still with a lot of great content, new storylines, new characters, and locations to explore in a new playable area of the Tamriel map that we hadn't had access to yet, just like I said, on a smaller scale than a full chapter release without like a major system, like we would see with Gold Road or the Necrom chapter, for example. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and also predict that this new smaller story zone that we'll see might actually be free if you have an ESO Plus subscription. But this just seems to be the direction of more and more of ESO's content drops lately, such as both new companions last year being included in ESO Plus, and many previous story zones also being included or even just given away for free to players for completing achievements or for special events. Financially, I think it makes sense in a lot of ways for ZOS to push more into ESO Plus. I mean, if you think about it, the insane amount of hours they would need to create a full chapter DLC to charge just $40 versus, I'd assume, a lot less time to create a smaller story zone experience that might still keep players engaged with ESO Plus, which is, $15 per month for maybe another 2 to 3 months longer. That kind of seems like a better investment long term. So smaller, more frequent updates aimed at keeping players engaged, logging in, holding on to their $15 a month ESO Plus subscription. Now, that's just a guess for me, but I'm sure they have all the dollars and cents worked out on their end, and they have a plan that's going to work best for them. But speaking of this new zone release, where might it actually be? Now, there are of course many options, but I personally think we may get an expansion to the Black Marsh area of Tamriel for a couple of different reasons. First, we can see that the Black Marsh region in ESO is huge and it has a lot of potential for expansion. Here you can see that the area which is considered Black Marsh actually contains a lot of holes in it for ESO potential content. And looking at the map of Tamriel itself, we can even see a major city here, which is not in ESO yet, called Hellstrom, which is considered by many to be the capital city for Argonians. And we know that with these new zone releases, we tend to have a central city as part of its design. Also, if you look at the announcement image for the ESO Direct next month, you may have noticed the reward here for attending the event is a pet monkey, and surrounded by more monkeys and an Argonian, which all of that seems to fit this area as a potential zone as well. And even taking a closer look at the background itself for this image, you can see a lot more Argonian themes represented here, as if we were inside an Argonian hut in an Argonian city somewhere. Actually, this reward announcement kind of reminds me of the 2023 chapter reveal event, where we got this ritual emote, which appeared to have a background of the city of Necrom, aka the city of the dead, with all the burial stuff in the background image. So very similar vibe here. Also shout out to Jake Clips, who in one of his videos discussed ESO's next zone and talked about a conversation he had with a developer at a recent event who gave him a clue using the word lush, which, jungles are generally considered to be lush locations. Also, if you remember last year's chapter, the clue word there for the Gold Road chapter was autumn. And yeah, that zone was definitely full of autumn vibes and beautifully designed. So it seems to be that these clue words are directly located to the geography of the next zone's area. And generally speaking, the ESO art and zone design teams do some pretty amazing work, and they like having new themes and especially new biomes to showcase their work. We had Gold Road last year with the autumn theme. The year before that, we had Necrom and Apocrypha, which was just amazing, art and zone design. And recently, we haven't really had like a lush or a dense jungle zone atmosphere in ESO. And like I said, those art and design teams are always pushing to try new things and new styles. So I think Black Marsh, which is basically the most dense of all jungles in Tamriel, natural home to the Argonians, is a good bet here. So there you go. I'm about 95% sure we're headed to somewhere new in Black Marsh this year for all those reasons. But what about new features? Well, I hope this is another big part of ESO's plans this year. And it seems to at least be when we go back to Matt's letter and dissect that even further. One thing he singled out there, which has been a huge player request for years now, is increasing the difficulty of overland zones. And if nothing else comes this year, I do hope that ZOS does implement this new feature because it is definitely needed. As I said earlier, the overland zones in ESO are some of the most beautiful to walk around in the entire game, but in many cases it's just window dressing and there's no challenge to that exploration, as anyone above level 15 can probably tell you. So what would increased overland difficulty look like then? Well, I think we can say that it will likely be optional because for new players it is nice to have that default easy mode style of difficulty, but for more experienced players this could mean harnessing the game's already existing normal and veteran instance system and just applying this to some overland zone content. For example, I think this could easily be tied to public dungeons and even delves, which are really interesting content and even have their own, unique quests and unique bosses. But again, they're super easy for most players, so being able to select a difficulty before entering a public dungeon or a delve would be an amazing addition. Now, in terms of those larger overland zones themselves, I don't think we will see an instance manager for those, as it would probably split up the population of the game too much. But what we could see instead is more veteran level encounters within those zones, kind of similar to how Craglorn works, where there are some different temple areas and players can choose to engage with those and spawn in waves of enemies and eventually a boss to earn a reward. Something like this that is more player driven, that we can actually start up ourselves, either solo or by bringing up a group of friends to a specific location and then starting an event. I think that would be really cool, and it wouldn't take much tweaking of the existing overland zone mechanics, as it would just be like an extra event, an extra layer available in that location. Even more roaming bosses, as we saw in the Deadlands DLC, for example, would be a good start, but they could take that even a step further to zone-wide bosses that are even stronger and require more players to take down successfully. So obviously there are many ways to accomplish this idea of increased overland difficulty, and again, my thought is we will see this feature in some form start to take shape this year because it ties into ESO's long-term goal of improving the base game experience and giving people more ways to engage in existing content systems at different levels of experience. Now, my hope is personally that the increased difficulty for overland means more than just enemies with bigger health pools that deal more damage. Ideally, we would actually see enemies with new mechanics and movesets, new AI, and not just copy and pasted enemies with inflated stats. This is going to be a key component of getting this feature right, because as it stands currently, there is a huge divide between, quote, beginner content like overland zones and, quote, veteran content like DLC dungeons and trials without much space in between. ESO has always had this difficult problem of its skill gap because there just isn't much variety of content that takes players from that beginning level of competency up to the next level and to the veteran ranks. So hopefully overland difficulty at least attempts to bridge that gap. But there's also a big question I have, which is rewards. Or in other words, why would I even bother to do harder overland content if I can just breeze through, the base game zones? So the reward structure and the incentives here is going to be really important as well. when it comes to rolling out a system like this and making it attractive to players in the first place. But one of ESO's biggest problems in general over the years has been its reward structure, with its huge focus on itemizing content with mostly gear sets more than anything else, which naturally has led to this bloated system with hundreds of sets which are for the most part completely ignored by the player base, while just a handful of sets are really all that's needed for the majority of content and builds out there. And now a good example, I think, of itemization in ESO from the past that devs could maybe recreate in some way is mythic items, which only take up one gear slot but can provide, a lot of really unique playstyles and options, like the Oaken Soul Ring, for example, which made one bard builds finally a viable playstyle. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have itemization like class sets, which, while a good idea in theory, really did nothing for build diversity due to the fact that you had to give up an entire 5-piece set to invest yourself into a class set for your build, which many times was actually a downgrade compared to the gear that you were already using. So I really hope that if this new overland difficulty feature is given new sets as rewards, that it's not just more of the same 5-piece sets, which, like I said, we already have hundreds of those and most of us are not even using them. So what would be really interesting instead is something like maybe some new 3-piece item sets as rewards to, mix up our build options, or even provide maybe a brand new slot for gear, like a 4th accessory, like maybe a trinket slot, for example. But the point is that ESO needs to do something new in terms of itemization and rewards that we haven't seen before. If they do that, it's really going to take things to the next level and engage players even more. Now, there are even more new features, which Matt mentioned in his studio director's letter last year, which we might see next month at the ESO Direct, including more graphic updates, such as updated combat animations and effects. We know, for example, that the starter zones recently received a graphical update, and I'm sure that won't be the last for visual updates that we see. Hopefully that type of refresh comes to, Alliance campaign zones as well. Those definitely could use a new coat of fresh paint. He also mentioned experimenting with creating more new zones, similar to how Craglorn works, that features, high-end group content. I think this could be really interesting as well. I mean, imagine a trial which was not a trial, but was an entire open world zone that could support multiple organized groups at the same time. That could really mix things up for endgame content in ESO, but we will know a lot more for sure in less than a month's time. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section below. Do you think we'll see a new zone released right away? And if so, which one will it be? And what about those new systems like overland difficulty? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. Everybody, one of the best features of HTM is our YouTube membership community, where you can unlock some really amazing perks for supporting the channel. Our level 2 membership, called the Elite Squad, is where I recommend you start, because this unlocks tons of members-only builds and guides that you won't see anywhere else on YouTube. That's because each of our members-only builds are handcrafted to be completely unique, off-meta, and give you access to something really fun, powerful, and easy to play. For example, the Solo Death Knight build focuses on insane self-healing and resource regeneration available to the Necro class in ESO, while the Unkillable Arcanist build focuses on channeled effects that buff your damage mitigation and shields for easy survival. We have the Unkillable Werewolf build focused on pure heavy attack carnage, and one of my favorites, a no-class skills Barbarian build, which focuses completely on two-handed abilities and is now supplemented with scribing skills, so it feels like a completely new class of its own. And these are just some examples of all the unique content on offer, and we're always updating and adding to this list every month. Plus, each members-only build also comes with an exclusive written guide only for channel members to make these even easier for you to build yourself. But of course, that's not all you get. We also have loyalty badges, which will appear next to your name in YouTube, plus early access to videos and access to our members-only Discord, so you can ask questions and chat with myself and other players in our community. So if that sounds good to you, just click on that join button right beneath my video in YouTube to get started, and make sure to select the Elite Squad option to unlock those exclusive videos. Or go to hacktheminotaur.com/members for more information and to see the full list of absolutely everything you can unlock. We've even added some members-only guides recently, like my favorite hidden grind spots for ESO, so there is a truckload of content for you to explore once you sign up. Finally, I just want to say a quick thank you for supporting me and the HTM community. YouTube pays gaming creators only pennies when it comes to running ads on our videos, so it's channel members like you that actually keep this channel going now and into the future. Believe me, your support is greatly appreciated. So welcome to the squad, and I will see you around in the next video.